The NBA is one of the sharpest betting markets in the world, and most bettors lose because they're guessing, not because they don't know basketball. In this video, we're not giving picks, we're breaking down how to actually bet the NBA, how the markets work, where edges come from, and how professionals think in terms of plus EV, closing line value, and their process. So if you've ever wondered why your bets feel right, but your results don't match, this guide is going to be for you. And if you like structured process based betting content like this, hit that like button. It's going to help the channel more than you think. This is the 2025 NBA betting guide. Let's get into it. Before we talk stats or models, we need to start here, and that's the NBA betting market. Well, the NBA is a big market sport, and that means there's a ton of money involved, from casual bettors all the way up to professionals and sports books. So, because of that, the NBA is one of the sharpest betting markets out there. The lines you see are very efficient, and they move very fast. So, that doesn't mean you can't win. It just means that edges only exist when you can identify inefficiencies in the market. So you're looking for those overreactions, the underreactions, maybe some rest, travel, maybe even late news. That's where opportunity is going to show up. And this is important, right? In big market sports like the NBA, reading the betting market is not optional. So if you don't understand line movement and why numbers change, long-term profitability is going to be extremely hard. So we actually break this down in our detailed video here at Grandstand Sports Data. It's how to analyze the betting market. If this part feels fuzzy, make sure that you check that out. We're going to leave a link in the description down below for that video. So with that foundation, now we can move on to how we actually find some of these edges. Now that we understand the NBA is a big, sharp market, the next step is going to be the research process. And this is what helps you identify inefficiencies in the market, so not guess games. Our research process is built around three pillars. First is going to be market analysis. This is understanding line movement, betting percentages, and where money is flowing. We already routed you to our market analysis content because this part is going to be absolutely crucial. The second pillar will be technical analysis. This is your data. Think about stats, models. Power ratings would be both technical analysis and fundamental analysis, and we will get to that just in a second. And what technical analysis does is it helps you tell what should happen if the teams played repeatedly. That's basically in layman's terms. Fundamental analysis is going to be the context, right? Injuries, rest, travel, matchups, coaching, even motivation you can throw in there. It's going to explain why a game might play differently than the numbers alone suggest. So when you combine market, technical, and fundamental analysis, you give yourself the best chance to spot where the market is being mispriced. And we're going to break down each of these in more detail as we move forward. So don't worry about that. All right, so now let's quickly cover the popular NBA bet types. And before we even list them, this is going to be the most important rule here, and that's you should master one type before moving on to more. I know most bettors will lose because they try to bet spreads, totals, props, and then futures all at one time without even understanding how each one behaves, and that's going to be a huge mistake. So let's start with the most common bet type, and that's going to be point spreads. So you're betting whether a team can cover the number, not just win the game. And in the NBA, key margins matter, especially 2, 3, 4, and 6, because of the late fouling, the free throws, and how NBA games they typically finish. Totals will be next, and those are over unders. These are about the scoring environment. Think about pace, shot selection, even efficiency. I would put in there. So not which team is necessarily better. Totals can often be softer if you understand how games are likely to be played in the styles of the two teams. Now, let's move on to money lines. This is simply betting who wins outright. Money lines are best used when the spread doesn't properly reflect the true difference between the teams. That would be a time when you jump on the money line. Next would be player props. These have exploded in popularity. These focus on individual performance. So you're thinking points, rebounds, assists, and they're often driven by minutes, usage, and matchups. We'll get into that a little bit later. Finally, you have futures, and these are the long-term bets like win totals, awards, or championships. Even to a smaller degree, sometimes people will, pick a division winner when it comes to NBA. These require more patience, though, and are best attacked when you have a strong long term view. We're going to dive deeper on bet types when we reach the technical analysis portion of this video because that's where we identify which stats actually correlate to each of these bet types. But for now, just understand what's available and why focusing on one bet type at a time is going to give you the best chance of being profitable or even becoming profitable. Right, so let's do a quick pit stop here for bankroll management. And the reason why it's a quick pit stop is because it's non-negotiable. No matter what sport that you're doing, it doesn't matter what it is. But for the NBA, what you do need to know is that it's a long grind. There are a lot of games, there's a lot of slates, and there's a lot of chances to make mistakes if you're not being disciplined. And with that, we need you to know that there's only three ways that you can really grow your bankroll. Number one is going to be passive income. This is just you taking a portion of your bankroll and putting it into a high yield savings account. And what that's going to do is it's going to help your bankroll, your idle bankroll, the thing that's just sitting there, actually grow. Number two is going to be making deposits. This is from your personal income, whatever you're doing, you're making savings, and then you deposit it into your bankroll. Pretty simple. Number three is going to be probably the most difficult here, and it's going to be winning. Winning in sports betting is obviously hard, but it obviously starts with protecting your bankroll first. That's what people think. First thing that they do is, oh, we got to go crazy with the going on plus EV bets. We need to find every single nook and cranny and make that bet. No, the first thing is going to be protecting it. And how you protect it is you never do 5% on a single bet. This goes back to our 5% to 15% rule. Never more than 5% on one bet, and never more than 15% of your bankroll should be exposed in a slate. This says weekly. That is a typo. It should be in a slate, especially for the NBA. Just want to let you know that. Now, this is also going to depend on your style as well. It's going to depend if you're a sniper bettor or you're a volume bettor. And snipers, they basically have fewer games, but with slightly bigger edges. Now, volume bettors will play more games, but with smaller edges. So think of it as almost volume bettors are playing almost every edge on the board, where snipers like to filter their bets, really get into it, and make their best plays. We're not going to go deep into these yet or into bankroll management at all. It's just this is how it applies to the NBA. Also, it's universal, so it applies to the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball. It applies to everything. We'll leave links in the video description to our bankroll management content if you want to dive deeper. But for now, just understand this. If you don't manage your bankroll, nothing else in this guide is going to matter. So no matter what sport you're betting, every decision is going to start with one thing, and that's going to be your line. And when I say your line, I mean the number your own process produces. So whether that's going to come from modeling, fundamental research, or even a mixture of both. Sometimes it's right on the market number, sometimes it's going to be off by a half point, and sometimes it's going to be way off and out of space. And that's okay. The point is to measure it compared to the market, test it, and then find out if you have a proven edge. So the question is going to be simple. Does your line show a repeatable edge compared to the market's line? Now, you track that using two things. You're going to do expected value, and you're also going to do a closing line value. Now, expected value, or EV, or plus EV, is what tells you if your projection beats the market price. So you only want to bet when that value is positive, when your probability suggests that you're getting the best of it. That's basically when you want to make that bet. Now, closing line value, or CLV, you'll see for short, tells you if the market ultimately agrees with you. So if you're consistently beating the closing number, you're doing it right. That's one of the strongest indicators of long-term profitability. So if you have both now, positive EV and closing line value, that's going to be your green light to place the bet ASAP. Now, if you've got positive EV but no closing line value, that's where style comes in. Some volume bettors might still fire because they play as many edges as possible, whereas snipers might wait for that market confirmation before pulling the trigger. But either way, you can't skip this step. Every bet you make has to start with your line. because that's how you separate discipline analysis from only guessing. Now, let's talk about market analysis for the NBA. One of the most important skills you can have in a big market sport is obviously market analysis. Now, the goal here is to become a contrarian, and you do that by watching three things closely: bet percentage, money percentage, and market signals. When the majority of bets are on one side, but the majority of the money is on the other side, that's often a sign of sharper action stepping in. Then you're going to add in some line movement. And if you start to see where the market may be telling a different story than the public opinion, that's when you would jump. Now, not every move is sharp. That's a mistake a lot of bettors will make. Some line moves are driven by professionals, others are driven by public money, reacting to headlines. Learning to tell the difference is going to separate real market readers from those casual bettors. In the NBA, you'll also see common market overreactions all season long, though. One would be blowout wins or losses. They can cause the public to overvalue or undervalue teams after only one game, and that would be huge in a sport like the NBA where there's 82 of them. Next would be national television games. They exaggerate perception because everyone is watching, which leads to more public money. So that's something you want to take advantage of. Star player narratives would be another one, like hot streaks, big performances. These can move lines more than they actually should. And then finally, we have media narratives, whether it's TV or podcasts. These are built for attention, not necessarily accuracy. Advanced bettors may also take advantage of arbitrage and middling opportunities, especially when numbers move quickly due to late news or lineup changes. So we're not going to go deep here because market analysis applies to every big market sport, not just the NBA. But we'll leave a link in the description down below for our video, how you analyze the market. And then from here, we'll move on and focus on fundamental and technical factors that actually help us find NBA specific edges. Now, let's talk about fundamental analysis for the NBA. The contextual factors, that explain why games don't always play out the way the numbers say that they should. We're going to start with rest because this is one of the most important factors in the NBA. Back to backs, 3 games in 4 nights, and then rest differential. These actually matter a lot. Load management has become popular in the media recently, but bettors have been tracking rest for basically years. Tired legs affect shooting, they affect defense, they also affect effort. And over an 82 game season, that adds up very, very quickly. Next is going to be travel. We're talking about time zones, they matter. Long road trips matter. And even altitude matters, especially in places like Denver and Utah. These spots consistently impact visiting teams, and the market doesn't always price it correctly. Then we're going to get into matchups. And this is where style meets style, right? We're talking about switchability, rim protection against drive heavy teams, 3 point defenses versus volume shooting teams. It's going to be style versus style, is basically what we're trying to say. Then on top of that, lineup combinations are huge in the NBA. So knowing which lineups are productive and which ones are getting exposed, this can help you find edges that don't show up in the team level stats. Next is going to be injuries. These are another major factor, especially in the regular season. Depth matters more in the NBA regular season because the rotations are wider and benches play real minutes. This is where a lot of bettors make mistakes, though. Don't carry this logic straight into the playoffs. In the postseason, benches shorten, urgency ramps up, and the best players and best lineups play more. It's just facts. Injuries will still matter, but they're priced differently. Just know that. Finally, we have motivation. As the season goes on, motivation becomes clearer. Teams either find themselves in the playoff hunt or in a lottery contention, and that's usually the line of demarcation where goals change. I'm not saying teams tell players to tank, but do general managers and coaches sometimes roll out lineups that are clearly NBA level, subpar? I guess I would say yes. I do. I think that happens. You'll also see a lot of letdown spots where teams come off big wins or emotional games. All of these factors can help explain why the market can be wrong and why fundamentals are such an important complement to market and technical analysis. So I don't want you to just eyeball this stuff. Log it into your record keeper, track how many points each factor is really worth, and then over time you can start folding them into your model and turn them into better long-term predictors. Now, let's hit some secondary and external NBA factors. These usually don't drive bets on their own, but they absolutely help confirm or fade an edge. And the first one we're going to have is coaching. Rotations, pace, and even in game adjustments matter a lot in the NBA. Coaching rotations are very similar to what we talked about in the last slide with matchups. So it's about who's on the floor together and when. Some coaches stagger stars very well, and some don't, and that's going to show up in the results. Next is going to be chemistry. This is going to be harder to quantify, but it matters, especially after trades, lineup changes, or when teams start losing buy-in. You'll feel this more than you'll see it in the box score. Next is going to be the external side. We're talking about venue. This matters, and we're not just talking about the crowd. Even though you would factor that in, the crowd does take a little bit of the portion of the pie for that. But another one is some shooters have openly talked about different lighting and sight lines in certain arenas that help or hurt their shot. So it's very subtle, but over time, these things start to show up in the data. And then finally, I think probably the most obvious one is that officiating. Officiating should always be considered in the NBA based on their history, right? We all know their history in NBA and officiating. There's really no reason not to here. Some crews call games tighter, some let them play, some impact the pace, some impact the whole effing game, right? Foul trouble, totals, everything. Donahue doesn't you just have to factor it in. That's all I'm saying is you have to factor it in. Overall, here, these factors usually won't be the headline, but when they line up with the rest of your research, they can make a good edge even stronger. So that's what you need to know. So if this way of thinking about the NBA is useful, consider subscribing and giving a like to this video. Also, please note that I'm out here with the flu, still giving you this information, still working hard for you guys, and still recording this video, even with the flu. That's going to account for something, at the least a like. Now we're going to move to technical analysis for the NBA. And the whole point of technical analysis is to help you figure out which stats actually matter for the bet type that you're trying to make. So that's how you decide what belongs in your model and what doesn't. So when it comes to point spreads and money lines, you're going to be looking at team strength. Things like net rating, offensive and defensive rating, the four factors of basketball, and then true shooting percentage. All of these do a really good job at telling you which team is better and maybe by how much. Now, the four factors of basketball, in case you don't know, and this is very loose, this description is very, very loose, is going to be shooting efficiency, turnovers, rebounding, and free throws. And together they explain who scores more efficiently, who gets more possessions, and then who controls the game. So that will be a good resource to look into if you are starting a model. Next is going to be the totals now. The focus shifts to scoring environment for this, right? You're going to look more at pace, maybe effective field goal percentage, 3-point attempt rate, free throw rate, and then also some transition numbers that come into play. So these stats help you explain how many possessions you're likely to see and how efficiently these teams score. So the key idea is going to be simple. Modeling is just finding advanced stats that correlate with your bet type. Nothing more than that. And I'll leave you with this. Basketball, in the NBA in general, is actually a pretty simple sport to analyze. Most of the numbers that you need are right there in the box score. A lot of the times, digging deeper and deeper into obscure metrics is just a waste of time. So, what I would say is find what works, track it, and try to keep it simple. All right, so let's wrap up the technical analysis portion with player props and futures. We're going to start with player props, and the goal is still the same. We're trying to find the stats that correlate with the bet type. So we're looking at minutes projections, usage rate, defensive matchup metrics, and then pace all matter here. And you can almost think of these bullets as a quick checklist. Does the player play a lot? Check. Does he get used when he's on the floor? Check. How's the matchup and how fast is the game likely to be played? Check, check. So just doing that consistently already will put you ahead of most of the betting public. Next is going to be futures, and you're looking at the long-term team quality. Things like net rating, point differential, and the top 10 offensive and defensive rule. This usually helps identify teams that are actually built to sustain success. And once you get into the playoffs, understanding stars versus role players, we like to call it here horses versus ponies, and then we'll call a ship player a donkey. But this becomes critical because basketball is a talent driven sport, and elite players have an enormous amount of success in the sport. And lastly, one quick note on error adjustments in predictive stats. You want the stats in your model that explain what wins now, not what worked 10 years ago. So styles and rules, they constantly change, so measuring what's predictive today and adjusting over time is going to be very, very crucial. Outcome stats tell you what happened. Predictive stats help you figure out what's about to happen. And that's what you need to look into. All right, now let's talk about systems. And a system is simply a repeatable pattern of events that over a large sample size help you make a better guess about an outcome. So it's not magic, it's not predictive on its own, it's just the result of tracking fundamentals and technical factors consistently over time. So the key with systems is that they only exist if you're record keeping and testing. So if you're not tracking results, you're not building systems, you're just guessing. So let's look at an example on the screen here. First, we're going to start with the spread system. It's going to be rest differential mixed with fade home favorite on a back-to-back. This system targets spots where a team is favored at home but is playing on a back-to-back, while the opponent has a rest advantage. So the market tends to overvalue home court and ignore fatigue, especially in the NBA where rest matters more than people realize. Well, over the track sample size, which has been the last 2 years, this system went 60 and 36, good for a plus 18.6 in terms of unit size and a 19.4% return. So not random, right? It's basically that it's rest consistently showing up in the numbers, especially for home favorites off a back to back. Basically, what it's saying is that the home team is taking a night off because it just played the night before. It's a little bit tired, and the other team has more rest coming into their barn. They tend to cover. Well, let's take a look at a money line system that we have here. And this system targets underdogs coming off of a blowout loss when they are the faster paced team in a matchup. So, after a blowout, the market tends to overreact and downgrade these teams too aggressively. When the dog also plays at a faster pace, you introduce more possessions, more variance, and then more chances for the game to break differently than expected, which is exactly what you want on money lines. Now, over the sample, the system went 89 wins and 189 losses, right? Terrible record, but still returned plus 24.28 units with an 8.7% return on your investment. This is a perfect example of why win rate matters less than price when betting money lines. You can see a poor record can make up for it because you're betting those dogs on the money line. So both of these systems hammer the same point, right? Tracking rest, pace, and situational context in the NBA matters a lot. And when you log these factors consistently, patterns start to show up. And that's where the real edges come from. Let's talk about NBA power ratings. And at their core, power ratings are just numerical measure of a team or player strength that allow you to make your own lines. So that's the whole goal. You're not trying to predict every game, you're trying to see where your number differs from the market's number. And to build them, you start with the core building blocks. And that's going to begin with net rating. This is going to tell you how team perform based on a per possession basis. That's going to be very, very critical. And then you're going to move on to strength of schedule because not all records are created equal, especially if you're handicapping these teams in the middle of the season. Finally, is going to be margin of victory, which gives you the more signal than wins and losses alone. From there, you're obviously going to layer some things in. You're going to want to put in some advanced statistics, the ones that we talked about back in the technical analysis portion. You're going to also add in some fundamental factors like rest, travel, and injuries. We touched on the most important ones in the fundamental portion. And then you want to constantly update. So power ratings are not static. They're going to evolve as the season changes. And finally, you use them to make your line. Then compare that number to the sportsbook's line to see if there's an actual edge. One more important reminder here, even if you only bet player props, you still need power ratings. That's right, you guessed it. They're going to help you understand team context, game environment, and expected performance. So if you're betting props, go back to that advanced stats checklist we talked about earlier, where it's minutes, usage, matchup, and pace. Power ratings help anchor all of that into reality. So if you don't know how good the teams are, it's really hard to know how good the players are going to look. So unlike the NFL, the NBA betting is a daily process, not necessarily a weekly one. So lines move faster, information that changes constantly, and then timing is going to matter. So the day starts in the morning with the bet selection process with an injury and rest scan. This is where NBA edges are born. You're going to look at back to backs. You're going to look at rest differentials, surprise scratches, and also some lineup news. As that information comes in, you're going to want to update your research process that we talked about and compare your number to the opening lines. Now, by midday, you're looking for early edges. Our openers already off from your line. Our sharp books moving while consensus books are lagging behind. This is often where the best prices exist before the market fully reacts. Then we'll move on to the afternoon. This focus shifts to the market movement and news flow. So, injury confirmations, starting lineups, minute expectations, and sharp action all start to shape the board. So, you're constantly asking one question: are sharp lines moving toward my number? Right? That's the huge one right there. Finally, right before tip off, public money piles in. And this is where late indicators are going to matter. So if public action is pushing the market away from your line or confirming it, that's often the final green light. So NBA betting isn't, about firing nonstop. It's about patience, timing, and also confirmation. So when the information, the market, and your line all align, that's when you want to place your bet. So every NBA bettor runs into the same obstacles. The difference between winning and losing long term is whether you recognize them early and build habits to fight back. So let's start with the sportsbook's built in edge. First is going to be sharp info. Sportsbooks get injury news, lineup data, and betting signals faster than the public. So you're not going to beat them on raw information. Next is going to be the speed. NBA lines move very fast, especially with injury news and the load management that we talked about. So if you're late, the edge is usually going to be gone. Uh, how can you fight back from this? You should do your work before the news hits. Power ratings, rest tracking, matchup prep. So when the news does break, you're really reacting and you're not necessarily scrambling around. Market size will be another one. The NBA is a massive betting market. Big money flows in. Bad numbers don't just last long. Uh, Now we're gonna move on to the kind of the tilt traps. The first one's obviously gonna be chasing losses. The NBA runs every single night, so this makes it easy to feel like you can get it back tomorrow, and that's exactly how your bankroll is going to die. Betting favorite players is another one. Stars are fun to bet, and sportsbooks know it. So popular bets are often overpriced, especially in the props market. Narrative traps, we're talking about hot streaks, revenge games, national TV performances. The NBA is full of storylines, so most of them are already baked into the line. That's what you need to know. And the NBA rewards discipline. So if you understand these obstacles and build systems to counter each of them, you're already ahead of most of the market. So just like we said earlier in the video, is that most bettors don't lose betting the NBA because they don't know basketball. They lose because of the discipline failures and even the mental shortcuts. Let's start with the discipline side first. The first one's going to be overbetting the board. We keep talking about this, right? The NBA has games every single night, which creates an illusion that every game is a betting opportunity when it's really not. The only time you really should be betting is when you have plus EV and closing line value. That's when you should. Next would be ignore inline shopping. So half a point or a few cents doesn't feel important to you right now until you start to add it up over hundreds of bets. So that's when it will start to peek its head. Next will be abandoning the plan. Think about a losing night makes people change strategies mid-season. That's how data gets polluted. Always stick to the plan long enough to get real sample sizes before making any changes at all. Next is going to be not tracking. And if you don't track bets, edges, and assumptions, you're guessing and you're not necessarily betting. I need you guys to record keep everything: results, variables, closing line value, context, fundamental factors. Record keep everything. Now, let's talk about the strategic and analytical obstacles. The first one's going to be recency bias, right? The NBA, we talked about it like 9 times already. It's a daily league. This makes yesterday feel more important than it actually is. So you have to zoom out. Use rolling samples, not just single game results. That's what's going to kind of keep you away from that recency bias. Next will be confirmation bias. So once you like a side, it's going to be easy to look for information that supports it. Don't do that. Always argue both sides of a bet at all times. Gambler's fallacy will be next. This is believing a team is due after losses or wins, and it's ignoring probability. Remember, every game is its own event. Trends only matter if the inputs still exist. Now, overvaluing small samples, that's going to be next. A hot stretch or a cold week can trick you into thinking something changed fundamentally, but you have to remember enough data is going to help you and it's going to help support you. The final one is probably the most important, and this is not accepting losing. So even good bettors lose. If you can't accept that, you're going to chase, tilt, and then eventually oversize. Even the best bettors in the world, they lose 45% of the time. Trust me, you will lose. Now, NBA betting rewards the structure, the patience, and the self awareness. So if you fix these obstacles, your edge doesn't just improve, it's going to survive. Now, drop a comment and tell us what part of these NBA betting obstacles do you struggle with the most, and we read all of them, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. But make sure leave a comment on which obstacle really grinds your gears. But one of the biggest edges that you can build in NBA betting is simply staying educated. The league changes fast, and the bettors who keep learning are the ones who survive in the long term. So we're going to start with the analytical sites. We got NBA.com, Cleaning the Glass, and then Basketball Reference. These are going to give you a clean, reliable data straight from the source. And this is where you learn how teams actually play, and not just what the scoreboard says. Next, we're going to touch on some of the betting communities. We're talking about forums, discords, even Twitter or X. These are going to be useful for you to treat them as information sources. So, not pick services. Following team pages and even the beat reporters is going to be especially valuable in the NBA because you're going to get the lineup hints, you're going to get rest news, and you're going to get rotation changes. These often show up there. They can have you react quickly. You can also use NBA handicapping sites like Covers, OddShark, Sports Betting Dime, not because they're always right, but because they show you how the market is thinking and what narratives are forming around the game. They also give good statistical data too as well in the betting market. So then you have books and podcasts, and books on betting the NBA are great, but don't stop there. You should really look at how GMs operate, how coaches think, and what actually makes teams sustainable or fragile. The deeper your understanding of the sport, the sharper your betting instincts are going to become. So you should want to learn the sport on a deeper level. On the technical side, you want to learn data tools. Excel alone can take you very far, but if you want to go deeper, R or Python, they may, let you automate some tracking, test ideas, and also build some models that scale over time. Finally, I want you guys to use some betting tools. Sports odds history is excellent for pulling historical odds, so then you can back test some ideas instead of just guessing. So if you're not testing factors over time, you're relying on opinions instead of evidence, and that's not necessarily good, right? So the NBA is going to reward bettors who treat this like a craft. If you keep learning, keep tracking, and keep testing, your edge will compound season after season. All right, that's going to do it for the NBA betting guide. If you made it this far, you now understand how we think about the NBA. And if this breakdown sharpened how you look at the NBA betting, I want you guys to hit that like button. It's going to tell us this type of educational content is worth continuing. And if you want more guides like this, please hit the subscribe button to Grandstand Sports Data. That's what we're all about here. Drop a comment down below and let us know what part of the NBA betting process that you struggle with the most. Uh, Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel, and we'll see you in the next one.